And the Minister of Public Enterprise and Administration, Dlodlo, will launch a public service graduate recruitment scheme, and the initiative seeks to reduce the high number of graduate unemployment in the country. Minister Dlodlo joins us now via our outside broadcast facility. Good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us. Just in brief, exactly what are the objectives of this particular launch?
Good morning, Cindy. I'm the Minister for Public Service and Administration.
I beg your pardon.
I think you made a mistake there. We are launching the graduate recruitment scheme on the back of work that has already been done, initiated in the time of Minister Collins Chabane, as part of Outcome 12, which is Chapter 13, the implementation part of Chapter 13 of the National Development Plan. We have been at work since 2014, working on a scheme that, a framework that encompasses and gives norms and standards and establishes norms and standards for the recruitment process of graduates into the civil service, but specifically targeted at young people that we're trying to recruit into the service. Now, various departments have their own schemes. Like you would find one for the built environment, which is shared by the Department of Human Settlements, Public Works and Gauteng. You'll have the one on the new graduate recruitment academics, which is between the Department of Higher Education and the Department of Science and Technology. So there's quite a few of them in the public service. But what we have done as a department, directed by Cabinet, on Outcome 13 is to develop a framework that gives rise to norms and standards for the appointment, the recruitment, and training and development, basically, of new recruits. We have decided as a department to go broader than just the schemes and departments, but because we're responsible for human resource management and development in the public service, we have then started to look at what type of skills are required in the public service for us to be able to deliver on the mandates of the various departments, but also to address the service delivery challenges that are being experienced throughout the public service, from national level to provincial level, and also at local government level, which is the sole responsibility of Minister Zweli Mkhize. So in developing these norms and standards, having looked at the skills deficit or the skills gap in the public service, looking at what the NDP says, because we have to attract the brightest young minds of our country to help us to elevate the public service as an employer of choice. We are creating a pipeline of possible recruitees for the public service.
All right, and Minister, what does this mean in terms of cadre deployment, if I may use that phrase, because typically any government or party would want to appoint members in its own structures. So if we're having now a cohort of professionals that are apolitical, for example, what does this then mean in terms of governance?
I think, Cindy, the cadre deployment issue has been made to be almost like a swear word. I would expect, as a citizen, but also as an activist, I would expect that every political party would take it upon themselves to develop their cadreship, so that they can then form a cohort of developed individuals who could then enter the public service, because we're trying to create this to be the employer of choice for young people. Now, we in the ANC have a cadre development and a cadre deployment strategy. And any ruling party will bring in its people that it thinks will ensure that the implementation of its own programs and manifesto is implemented. Now, this particular one has got nothing to do with the ANC's deployment strategy. It has everything to do with our work as a government to ensure that we implement on the mandate of each department, but also ensuring that we address the service delivery challenges through innovative ways, through reforms, through transformation, through the establishment of norms and standards for service delivery. But this is but one of the ways of doing it, bringing in new blood that will inject some vibrancy into the system.
All right, and that in itself being a very noble gesture, you know, in positioning the state as an employer of choice. But there's also criticism that the various tiers of government are bloated, and that you need to trim the fat for more efficiency and competitiveness. Is that a concern for you?
I'm not sure where that comes from, because as I've always said, I have yet to receive a properly done study that tells me that the public service is bloated. What we say is what we think, but in actual fact, we are really not sure whether it actually is bloated. I would be able to say it is bloated once the macro configuration of the state has been finalized, wherein we will then be able to say, for this type of structure of government, these are the type of people and the numbers of people that we require. I cannot say for now that it is bloated. I can actually say that in certain categories of posts and jobs, we have a deficit of skills.
All right, Minister, so how is this scheme, this particular launch, the graduate program, going to enhance the image and competitiveness and give that sense of prestige of being a public servant?
Well, first and foremost, we are going to be I've just issued a directive to all executive authorities and also HODs to say that we need to extend the internship program, because it needs to be aligned to the way that we recruit people into the system. So if we say that the internship program is only 1 year and we require 2 years for an entry-level position in the public service, it then does not make sense, because we would not have developed or created that opportunity for young people to come straight out of university or straight out of working from government as an internee to then apply for these positions and be appointed. So we're aligning that to our recruitment strategy. The second thing is that we're also looking at training people so that they are completely given the type of skills that are required in the public service for them to be able to help us to deliver on our mandates. For instance, in the agricultural sector, we are in conversation with the University of Kentucky, and also they are talking to their partners within the agricultural sector to ensure that there is an exchange program between South Africa, our government, and also the state of Kentucky. We are looking at other options. There are other countries that are giving us those opportunities for exchange programs, but also just straight up training of our people, like for instance, China, Singapore, the United Kingdom, and Australia. So we are looking both to partners and also other universities within South Africa. For instance, one of our partners today that we're launching with is going to be the University of Johannesburg.
And the criteria, Minister, because many will say there are opportunities out there, you have to be hungry for it and have the propensity to win, but we know that the numbers are much more greater than what the state is even capable of absorbing. So what is the criteria of selection for this particular scheme?
Well, that's what we're working on at the present moment. But as I said to you earlier on, we're looking at the skills gap, the skills deficit. So we'll start with those skills that we do not have, those skills that we know that people are going to be retiring soon, start nurturing those young individuals so that we can recruit them. So first and foremost for us, we want to ensure that in the skills that we have a problem with in terms of deficit, that's where we're going to start training people at. But you must also remember, we will also be training not just for ourselves, we'll be training for the economy. The economy needs particular skills that we can assist the private sector and individuals who are entrepreneurs to come in the public service to train and then start their own businesses and be able to deal with their own issues of life. For instance, we're now working on the land issue. This is a perfect opportunity for us to help our young people to train in these skills that are required in that sector.
And the Public Service Graduate Recruitment Scheme, we're told the launch will kick off in essence with a high-level dialogue as opposed to benchmark and have international best practices. So, timelines in terms of once the dialogue has taken place, when do you then roll out the scheme?
Well, in discussion with the various departments, in essence, this has already been rolled out. What we have done is that we have created a framework developing norms and standards for the recruitment processes. For instance, the YES initiative, it has already begun. The Built Environment initiative has already begun. What we are doing is putting together all of those initiatives under one umbrella framework to ensure that the norms and standards are the same across the public service. But then we're expanding with other areas, like, for instance, I've mentioned agriculture. We're looking at other areas as well of expansion.
And often you find that opportunities may be more accessible in urban areas and rural areas perhaps being neglected in this part. How inclusive is this particular opportunity?
Well, if you look at, again, I'll go back to the land question because I'm so passionate about that. If you look at the land issue that is under discussion now, the expropriation of land without compensation, you will find a situation where a lot of this land that is lying fallow is in the rural areas. So obviously some of the people that are recruited into the service, some will then join the Extension Officer Corps of the Department of Agriculture. Some of them will look into the built environment, where we are also encouraging the establishment through the Black Industrialist Program. We're encouraging the establishment of manufacturing plants in the various areas. Some of those would have to be in the rural areas. We should learn from the way that China has done things, because the Chinese government has also ensured that the rural areas are developed. So if we have to learn anything from the relationships that we have with some of these countries, one of them is that of ensuring that we develop the rural areas. The NDP is also very explicit insofar as that is concerned.
Implementation has been a concern, where the ruling or governing party has had wonderful and internationally lauded policies, but it's just in the monitoring, the implementation and ensuring that things work the first time around. How's this program going to change that perception?
Well, what we're doing in the department now, what I'm establishing, is the Office of Standards. That Office of Standards is going to evaluate and monitor the implementation of whatever programs that would have been put in place, one of which will be this one. Because the norms and standards would have been established by us, we will have to ensure that every department abides by that. So we will monitor and evaluate this. But not only that, we will also give feedback to the public.
Just talk us through how this fits in, and I suppose bolster what has already been initiated through the skills levy and the CETAs, the internships, and now you have the public service graduate recruitment scheme. How does it all fit together if it's not a duplication?
But like I said, all of these systems were sitting there on their own, disparate, without norms and standards or a framework that establishes norms and standards for their implementation. So there has been no central reporting repository on the implementation, the successes, the failures, and all of that. But what we can tell you as a department is that the internship program has not been as successful as we would have wanted it to be, because it does not meet the requirements that we would have wanted as a department. So even if departments have these initiatives in place, the norms and standards for the whole of the public service had never been established. And this is exactly what this is doing.
Okay, let's talk about the event that kicks off a little bit later today, where various participants and vested interested parties will participate. Is it open, though, to the public, as it were, or is it essentially just around a select few?
Well, it's not a select few, because we're carrying it on social media. We're carrying it on conventional media like we are now doing. A lot of the youth would be listening in, watching this, and knowing that this is there. But from time to time, we will be giving information to people as to how to access this facility, how to access these benefits. But we'll be talking through universities, we'll be talking through the National Youth Development Agency, who are our partners in this. We'll be talking across the board to ensure that we reach as many youth as possible.
And how do you ensure sustainability and continuity, Minister, as we know that often depending on the administration, or whether that is moved or reshuffled, that certain policies are not extended, or they may even be discontinued?
You know, Cindy, this is one that the minister who comes after me would have no reason not to continue. Especially because we have a youth in South Africa who form the bulk of our population but are unemployed. So if anybody comes in after me, I don't think they would want to stop a program like this, except to say, I would imagine that they would want to enhance it and bring in as many partners as possible to ensure that it is effectively implemented and monitored.
And why should South Africans be excited about it? As you were saying, the gloomy picture of unemployment is a reality for many young South Africans. How much of a difference is this going to make in absorbing those that are currently unemployed?
Well, we have people that are reaching the age of 60 and 65 that are going to be retired from the public service in any case. So at some point we would have to look at a more nuanced approach to our recruitment strategy. We are responsible for the human resource management and development strategy of the whole of the public service. So we are assisting that process to ensure that the opportunities, even if they were open in the past, are now open to the point where we have set a standard for all departments to say you will not recruit less than 10% from within your vacancy list as it exists in departments.
And staff retention has been a problem also in the public sector because
so that's the excitement actually, because sorry.
No, I beg your pardon. I was just saying about staff retention, Minister, because you are competing with the private sector that may be more appealing and, you know, be able to offer more opportunities for graduates.
Well, I'm not sure if the private sector can absorb as many people. We are the largest employer in the country. And we have to make opportunities available to the youth, but also the environment in itself needs to be such that people want to stay in the public service. It's not about salaries, it's about the environment itself in its totality. The exposure that they will get working with government, the type of issues that they'll be exposed to, interaction with our communities, interaction with our people, just the satisfaction of putting a smile on an ordinary citizen who relies on you for a service.
And just before we let you go, just in terms of how much you spend in research, in you know, investigating the best international practices, innovation to drive South Africa to be the competitive country that it should be.
Well, I'm not sure of the total figure because it spans across the various departments because they have got their own mandates that they have to perform research on from time to time. But we have the Center for Public Service Innovation, which has a tiny, tiny budget, but we're trying to solicit funds from partners that we could bring on board to assist us to ensure that the funding model of the CPSI changes, that will bring in young, agile minds that will actually drive the process of innovation in the public service.